Hey, everyone. This is Dr. Crystal Richardson, and I'm so extremely happy to have you here today on Congress for Global Communication. We have a number of special guests that will be coming on, and I would like to thank Dr. Sonia for this opportunity to be able to facilitate. And we are just happy to talk about a global approach to quality education. And so, as we get started, we want to go over our vision and our mission. And the vision of the Congress for Global Communication, it exists to promote diversity and inclusion and inclusive dialogue, resulting in civility for all. Also, the mission of Congress for Global Communication is to build global connections and communication for the advancement of sustainable development goals by providing training, policies, recommendations, and empowerment forums with an overall scope of transforming the world. The purpose for Congress for Global Communication is to encourage dialogue, to impact humanity through collaborative global communication, to be a resource for sustainability of the development goals. So, with that, we want to just show a brief commercial related to what we're doing today, and then we will welcome on our special guests. Well, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for being on today.
Thank you. Good evening to you, Dr. Crystal.
Hi, Dr. Ronnie, and then we have Brian as well. Thank you all for being on. And how about you all just introduce yourself, and then we'll get into just a little bit of dialogue about the importance of quality education. Dr. Ronnie, you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the discussions tonight. As already said, I'm Dr. Ronnie. I'm based in Manchester in the United Kingdom. Um, I'm a pastor by calling. I'm involved with a lot of outreach work to kind of young people across the world. I go around the world, motivating young people to do well, talking to young people around issues affecting society today. Education is one of the key things affecting them. I'm also an entrepreneur and always in constant discussion with the corporate world around talent development, around education and how the education can contribute, to general societal development and all the needs that the education can address in terms of the future of the world that we live in today. So I'm very much excited to kind of tap in some of the knowledge and expertise that we've got here tonight. So thank you very much for having me, Dr. Crystal.
Awesome, awesome. And this is a global platform, so we thank you for being on from so far. I'm here in the United States, so thank you. And we have
Well,
Brian. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, and thank you, Dr. Crystal. I'm Brian Barnett, and I live in Northern Virginia, work in Northern Virginia, just across the river from Washington, D.C., so I'm based also here in the U.S. I've had a long career in international development and also small business development. So a lot of the world that I get involved in education sort of started when I had a teaching contract in the Dominican Republic at a Center for Rural Development in Santiago, and the second city there, second largest city in the Dominican Republic. But then since then had taught professional training in Papua New Guinea and in Kenya and Jordan and Bolivia and some other locations, and right now working on a secondary school in Uganda and on a couple of other projects. Also taught courses here in the US, in Seattle, and also Washington, D.C. So education has always been important to me personally, important kind of as a family history, and then also just professionally. So I'm pleased to be here, delighted to learn from the guests here and whoever is listening, and excited about all the different opportunities and all the different ways that education can take place. So thank you.
Awesome, awesome. And so I'll introduce myself. I am a member of the executive board of Congress for Global Communication. Delighted to be here by invitation of Dr. Sonia, who is the founder. And we also have the person who was supposed to be on today, and in the person of, I believe it's Dr. Benjamin. He was going to lead this, and he has some more things he's going to be providing to us. When we meet again, there's some of the questions that we were going to go over that we want to make sure that he is on to partake in that discussion. So we'll wait for him for those. But today we're talking about a number of things around the inequalities in education, the resources, what it is that we can do globally to help bring better education to the world. And so I am from Michigan, and we spent 10 years in Indiana, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, but right now I'm in San Antonio, Texas. And so I am a wealth innovation strategist, and I do a lot related to innovation and have been helping the Congress for Global Communication related to a few different things that we've done. Even went to Nairobi, Kenya when we went to the United Nations, and am just happy to be a part of this forum. So what we're going to do today, as I mentioned, is go through a few of these questions, and that's basically how the flow is going to go. This first one is where we will have a panel discussion, and then Ronnie is going to ask some of the questions, Dr. Ronnie. And we do have a few other people that are on globally, and so hopefully we'll be able to get their connections going. And if I see their face pop up that the connection is good, then maybe I'll play the commercial again, and then we'll bring them on so that we can have more people engaged. But for those of you who are watching, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, we would love to have you put the comments into wherever it is that you're looking at this, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or wherever. And when we see them, we will answer the best that we can during that time frame, or have someone reach out to you later. And so the first thing that I want to say, gentlemen, is the point we have here is the importance of quality education. And this is something we want to open up to all before we get to our scripted questions. So why is quality education important? And Brian, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think why it's important is that you want to bring everyone along, and you want everybody to join in and participate in the benefits of a quality education. And as I was thinking what defines a quality education, the first thought that came to my mind is that quality education happens in community, right? So you want to have a culture that raises up, honors, and values of quality education. In those communities, it can be a family or whoever is caring for the students. It might be if they're maybe a refugee and maybe their parents are no longer with them. So whoever's taking care of the students, family, you want them to embrace the benefits and be an encourager and a care for these people. But the communities are family, their school. You want a school that honors and values quality education, as well as the civic community and what I'll call the geography, the village or the city. So there is a culture that needs to be generated, I think, to get a really good quality of education, because people need to be cared for and they need to be encouraged. So no matter how well off or poor or whatever, we face things in life, and we need to have a target as students and be excited about that. And we need people to pick us up when we fall down. We don't do well on an exam, or somebody said something negatively at school. We need people, especially young people, to help process what's going on. And in that, we want to communicate with families, with the institutions, the school board, the school leadership, principal, headmaster, and teachers, and then the greater community. So that's kind of one part, is the community, a culture of honor and excellence, and also a culture in my mind of transparency, where people feel like, okay, I'm sending my kid to this school. What are we being taught? What is a parent? What's my contribution? What are other people's contribution? So that I can support, right? If I want to support my kid and other people's students and children, I want to rally around and say, yes, this is what we're all about. This is going to create a great curriculum, and these are the policies, and then the school's supported by the
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, so the two things that I heard you mention was, related to quality education is the school system itself, and then also the village aspect, people surrounding the students so that they can have a quality education. Very, very good. So
Yeah.
at this time, I want to also add to the stage Professor Jared and get him involved in this conversation. Good evening, maybe it is. I'm not sure. Professor Jared, how are you? You're on mute.
Yes, I'm saying good evening to you. It is 8 o'clock here.
Excellent, excellent. It's great to have you on. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then answer the question about what you feel quality education is?
My name, as you can see on the screen, is Professor Jared Akamonyari. I'm from Kenya. I'm a lecturer in the university. I'm a committee member of this quality education in Change Nations, and I'm looking forward for this kind of conversation, because talking is one way of solving the problem facing the world today. I don't know whether I jump straight away to question number one.
We're not on question number one yet. It's just a matter of what you feel. What's the importance of having quality education?
Yeah, when we talk about quality education, we are trying to embrace the commitment which has been given by the global leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And we are talking about sustainable development goals. They are 16 in number, and the quality education is number 4. And you can see now the leaders of the world through the United Nations have given a commitment that if we have to propel this world into another level, we need to tackle it through education, and we must have parameters where we have what universal kind of education for all children of mankind, of all nations in the world. We should not have different parameter of education in the developed countries, in less developed countries, but there is a commitment that this is the way to go, and that's why they are trying to address quality education. And here we are trying to imply that we need to have equitable and standardized education for all. That will promote lifelong learning for all people.
Awesome.
So that the children in Africa, the children in US, the children in Europe, the children in Asia, in Latin America must have a standardized kind of level of education.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding.
Excellent. So one of your main points was on the standardization of education when we talk about quality education being important. Very, very good. Thank you so much. Dr. Ronnie, what is your take on that?
Absolutely. Professor Jared, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming on board tonight. Indeed, I think when we look at the importance, we need to look at the outcomes of quality education, the reason why it is important, why we need it. And indeed, like Professor Jared said, it's been incorporated in the 16 Sustainable Goals, because I believe none of those goals could be achieved without education. Education is the foundation of any sustainable development. Education, never mind quality. Yes, quality, of course, we're looking at quality here today, but education is the key. It is the seed to anything that we can do. Anything is born from education. And the importance of quality education is the universal kind of approach that these discussions will bring. I know there are further discussions around what Benjamin is working on at the moment, but we're looking at a situation whereby the whole world understands what education is. The whole world will define it from the same perspective, even though we may apply it from a different perspective, depending on the resources that each country has got locally. And also, I think that whole notion of standardization matters because the world has become small. It has become global.
Right.
If I give an example of what's happening in Europe now, in Europe, we don't name anything by country, name it by city. I'm going Barcelona. This is what is happening in Munich. This is what is happening in whatever country that you name, because it has become small. So the perspective of the world has become global. Education has to be viewed from a global perspective. So what our children that are born today, children that are already grown, even adults that are in education today, they need to see things beyond their local communities. As much as it's very much a local approach, but with a global impact, people have to see things from a global perspective, hence this discussion. So yeah, thank you very much. I think it is key that we have these discussions on an ongoing basis and also educate one another.
Very good, very good. And so what I want to do, let me see if I can go out over here, is we have another guest that is with us. I want to bring him on, and we do have just a few more moments for this question. But what I wanted to say was the one thing that really stuck out to me to kind of overview what you said was the local approach, but global impact. That was profound. The local approach and global impact to education. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. So I'm going to bring on one more guest to the stage. Let's see. Hello, Professor. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And then what we're doing right now is just a general discussion on the importance of quality education. So go ahead and introduce yourself and just any comments you have on that opening question.
Okay. Thank you again for having me on this platform. My name is Professor Christopher Imolen. I'm from Nigeria, West African. I'm an academia. I'm currently the Vice Chancellor of Global Wealth University, located in Ghana and Togo. I also am the President of Joint Professionals Training and Support International. It's a higher learning institute here in Nigeria that has over 200 learning centers. I am also the founder of South Amazon University in Costa Rica. Invested quite a lot of time in the field of education. Coupled with the fact that I'm also a politician, I ran for the position of the President of Nigeria in the last election, 2023. I was a presidential candidate, but of course, I did not emerge the winner. So for education, I also coined a slogan, which I know it's under the United Nations MDG mandate called Education for All. That was one of our campaign, because my campaign then was All for All, and my center focus was education. We in Nigeria, we actually run a very low cost educational system that afford about 120,000 Nigerians, Togolese, Beninese, Ghanaian have access to affordable education, because I personally understand the impact of education, the importance of education in human building, in human capacity development first. Education, like I was listening to Dr. Ronin said education is all when it comes to building the mind of men. And if there is no quality education, access to quality education to the people, then the question of national development becomes a very critical one. So looking at education holistically, it's important as first individual, we understand the need to be educated. Education is not just about studying English, mathematics. All these subjects has an impact in making one a better person, in solving local problem, then global problem. So we need to begin to, especially from, I want to talk from the government part of it because having gone into politics, I've been able to see that government in every part of the world must deliberately support the fact that be educated. In the part of the world I'm from, we still have a lot of people who still want access to free education, quality education at the same time, because man needs to have this education in a way to build their mind and function better. So I was not in when you asked those questions, but for us, we look at issues of curriculum to meet market needs. One of the things we currently that is happening in Nigeria is that all the tertiary sector, I'm talking about the university, are now trying to run on a specific syllabus, looking at the challenge we have in our country. How do we start training Nigerians? How do we start training our people to get acquainted to looking at the future and the problem we have in our nation in a way to building leaders who can tackle these issues. So curriculum development becomes key. Training and retraining of facilitators, instructors who deliver the knowledge is another key factor. Those who deliver the knowledge, because we have a concept of globalization in education. Education right. is revolving. What we know, there's something called verisimilitude. What might be true in hypothesis tomorrow might have changed in tomorrow's context. So there is need for training and retraining of those who deliver the knowledge, because they actually are the vehicle that pass in the knowledge. Retraining, we have those issues in the third world nations, underdeveloped countries, where investment in education is very low. The United Nations have a benchmark that states that the budget of a country must budget not less than 10% to educational sector. We still see in this part of the world where we still have less than 6% being budgeted to education. So that shows that the government still have some level of apathy towards investment in education. From where I'm from, we have over 20 million people still out of school, 20 million people out of school. And if we look at the root cause of this, we talk about cultural belief. We still have some cultural belief that does not support embracing education in some other part of the world. Like where I'm from, I want to talk from where I'm from. We have religious belief that says, oh, you don't need to get this type of education, and government are now beginning to look at creating policies, creating laws that makes sending your child to school compulsory. That parents who are not willing to send their child to can be supported, and they should also make it mandatory that children go to schools. Children should not be seen on the streets during school hour. Creating laws that makes it a criminal offense to have parents not wanting to send their child to school.
Professor Chris, these are all really great points, and it looks like some of what you said is in relation to question number 2. So we might come back to some of that when Dr. Ronnie starts asking that. But thank you so much for your opening comments and your passion related to education. It's very, very, very important and key. So we're going to move into our next portion of the broadcast for today. And I'm going to play the commercial again. It's just a little 45-second commercial. And then Dr. Ronnie, you will go ahead and go into the first 3 questions. And Brian is going to help, and Dr. Jared and Professor Chris. Okay, are you ready, Ronnie?
Indeed. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Okay,
Awesome,
thank you,
awesome.
guys.
So go ahead, Dr. Rani.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for your contributions earlier on. So we're going to move forward. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and hopefully we can get to understand a bit more about this whole notion of sustainable goal number 4, as Professor Gerard said, and also we can get to understand a bit more about quality education. So first question, it's pointed to Brian. Wonder if you can help. Okay, we've mentioned quality education, having a local approach, but global impact. And, we've talked about, education is evolving. I believe because also the need of the world is evolving, a lot of issues are happening. We just have to be constantly developing how we deliver education and also the type of education we deliver. But what exactly defines quality education? Can you help expand our mind and our thinking around what it is that you're talking about when we talk about quality education, Brian?
Yes, there'll be probably several answers to that question, but I think the quality education overall is when somebody's enriched intellectually, but also personally and spiritually, right? And so a quality of education would be holistic and yet also very useful, right? So you want something that it takes when a person is done or completed a certain grade or a certain level, that they're able to contribute back to society in terms of a job or sometime, or even as a student, say you graduated from one level of school and now you're going to graduate school. Well, you can contribute to other people's education even while you're still a student. You could be tutoring other students and helping other professors as you go on in your educational journey. So I think of quality education as something that is not only enriching to you personally, but gets you engaged with other parts of the community through your job, through other things, that you're able to take your education and help other people formally or informally, mentoring, tutoring, however it might be, so that you replicate what you've learned. So and to my earlier comments, it was also by getting a broad section of the community to really honor and value education, right? And right now, I feel like we honor a lot of entertainment, little videos on our phones and sports teams, and those are all wonderful. But I feel like I'd love to see education, the benefit of it, the usefulness of it, and the pragmatism of it, and then see other people that other people look up to. They could be tribal leaders, community leaders, on a very consistent basis, describing the value of education and so forth. And I think the quality of education is a community value that needs to be cultivated, and then also personally, right? So I see that, and where inequities occur, I often see that in the lack of budgets or unequal budgets. I could also see that in poor diet or nutrition, because there's a body and brain development that's needed in order to grow and have that. And if you have a poor diet, that's not going to happen. Also, in terms of a civil society, if there's crime or violence or instability, it's going to be hard for young people to concentrate and get educated. So there's kind of a holistic community approach to it. But ultimately, I think quality education is one where people continue to learn throughout their whole life and continue to give, share, mentor, tutor, and spread the benefit of what they've learned throughout their whole life.
All right, thanks, Brian. I like what you mentioned there when you talk about holistic education, and also inclusive education, that every member of the society, the leaders, kind of family members and young people, old people, you kind of round up by talking about continuous education for all, that we do not stop educating ourselves, going back to the notion of education evolving, and because the society is developing every day, so educational systems have to constantly change. Professor Chris mentioned how we need to rethink our curriculum development, that curriculums have to kind of reflect societal needs today. That's very interesting. I wonder, gentlemen, if any one of you wants to chip in and add on to kind of any contributions around how you define quality education. Go on,
Yeah.
Professor Barrett.
Yeah, let me just have this to say, and I want to quote Sister Ellen G. White, and that's what I consider myself from my Christian perspective and thinking and believe, that education is the harmonious development of the mind, the body, and the spirit. And once you do this, we are preparing young people for this life and the life to come. So once we ensure that that is the way to go, then how do we move forward to have universal standards of imparting this one into young people? And that's where Professor Chris was coming about, talking about the curriculum. Students or young people who are trained to be doctors in the United States of America, in the UK where you are, in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, in Latin America, and in Africa must be the same. And once I've said that, I say that if we have to change our societies, if we have to change the thinking and the ways of doing things, that's why the wisdom of the object of the Sustainable Development Goal had to say that we need quality education and education for all. That is the way to go. And the next thing which we need to ask ourselves is that when we talk about quality education, we are talking about efficiency and the educational process. That's why and I say that the founders of Sustainable Development Goals, and they say that this is how we want to propel the world in the next 15 years. And we are 7 years down the lane, up the lane, to ensure that we have done the parameters. And that, actually what we are trying to do is we are acting as a think tank for where people find ways on how to move and achieve quality education. And the other point that I want to put across is that for us to achieve this is to have an honest conversation. We must be able to we must have this kind of conversation and not have an academic exercise.
Right.
It's a commitment from the world leaders to ensure that this quality education is achieved. What are some of the parameters which have been put in place? And that's where Brian was talking about teachers and teachers trained. What are the methods and the method standards? So as we do this, we should not make it an academic exercise that we can come here in a talk show and we do and we end that. So in the nutshell, I'm saying the quality of education, I mean, everything is the one Sister Ellen G. White had a vision to say that we need to have an harmonious development of the body, the mind, and the spirit in preparing young people for this life and the life to come.
Wow. And I see that having a good kind of synergy with what Brian is talking about as well. Holistic, education that addresses the whole person, that addresses the whole society, that doesn't discriminate, education that addresses the whole humankind, I got educated in Zimbabwe myself, moved from Zimbabwe to the UK. I was able to come in and fit in the UK because the education system is very harmonious between Zimbabwe and the UK. But is it harmonious with America? Is it with Kenya? How does it take me to Nigeria? It raises some interesting conversation around the standardization and globalization of education. Very, very, very interesting there. Allow me, gentlemen, and you've also highlighted a few things that jump into question number 2, which I want to highlight on question number 2. We're going to jump into that. But as you go into question number 2, Professor Chris, what I've planned here is to ask this question. I want to start with you, and then Brian and everybody else can help you in support with that, because these gentlemen have started talking about some of the inequalities that exist in the education system. And what's your view in terms of some of the inequalities that are that exist in the education systems? I know in your first presentation you kind of gave some local examples as well, and it would be good to have a global perspective with the kind of international experience which you have. What inequalities have you discovered around the world?
Okay, again, thank you for the question. As the world revolves, definitely we're going to have levels of imbalancing, not just in education, even in the way we do things, because of the level of exposure, the level of acceptance of education, the level of civilization of various parts of the world. For example, even in our country, for example, we have differentials in education from states to states. We are not even talking about the global. Even in the country, you see that there is a lacuna between the north and west in our country, that the west are more educated as compared to the north. Various factors. Some are religious factors, some are cultural beliefs, some are infrastructural, some are civilization, And when I talk about infrastructure, the world today is looking at digitalization of education, whereby an instructor could be in the US and deliver a lecture where even students in Africa can also access such education via an online interactive mode. But you see, technological advancement also has affected educational imbalancing all across the globe, and that we know it's going to take a lot of time before education can actually have similar standard. And more importantly is the need assessment. Every country have what's called uniqueness in their various challenges. So for example, we have some countries who today are currently in their 4th industrial revolution, while in Africa we are still operating a locomotive economy. Some countries have not yet even conquered hunger, for example. So if you look at the Abraham's Maslow of needs, education may not be a priority to someone that is hungry. He wants to feed first, and it's so this differential in imbalance in education is tied to so many factors, and we need to begin to look at solving some problem. For example, zero hunger in some providing facilities, providing electricities, and value for education will now begin to And for if a country, for example, in Africa, has a budget of about some billions of dollars, those countries will invest more in sector they believe is more important to them. And for some of them, education might not just be paramount. It might be security. Let's look at what is happening in the Middle East now. Investment is going to go more in security than education, because insecurity is more paramount. In Nigeria, we have some part that have insecurity challenge. So budgets are going to go more into insecurity, into agriculture, rather than research, rather than technology, because so these are actually factors that affect education imbalancing all over the world. And I believe we need to begin to look at Education is a lifestyle. Everything we do. And when we talk about education is not just about what we study in the school. We have the formal education, we have the informal education, and we have the non-formal education. So this is about our society. It's about everything we learn, everything that goes into our mind, that shape who we become, that builds our value system. So, and the quality of our life determines the quality of our economy, determines the quality of education we're going to get. So, like simply put, quality education for me is a process that leads to effective learning in a way of achieving character transformation and skills development. Because if you're educated and your character is not transformed, your mind is not transformed, and you don't possess new skills that are capable of changing or solving problems, then we can say we are not educated. I would like to stop there.
All right, that's very interesting. Brian, you're very well experienced in international delivery of education, and I'm sure within that you've kind of been involved in various kind of educational systems, in the many places that you've been and that you've helped support like training and education. What is your take on some of the inequalities that exist? And I'd like you to also comment on what Professor Chris has mentioned when he mentioned, he gave an example of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we could talk about quality education here, whereas in another geographical place, the priority is food. Any observations in your travels?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I agree with a lot of what Professor Chris had mentioned, right? And so some of these inequalities, they'll take different forms. Some is the community. Okay, maybe the community is what I'll call in survival mode, security or agriculture. So education isn't too high a priority, which, hey, 100, 200 years ago in the US, it was the same thing. People are trying to do farm work, and then with the leftover time, they'll go to school. And that's how Sunday schools happened in the US, because kids were working Monday to Saturday. Sunday was the day off. So Sunday schools back then were about math and reading and writing and whatever, in addition to the character. It was so that's like 1 day a week school, right? And that's here in the US, 100 or more years ago. So, and then later, Sunday school focused more on character and Christian faith and so forth. But yet as cultures develop, they'll have different priorities. And so I see the inequalities can be in the availability of food, because that will divert your attention real quick, and the availability of water, kind of basic living skills. So I think those Maslow hierarchy of needs is very much a consideration of the type and form of delivery of education. What if my child, if I have 3 children, maybe I need 2 or 3 of them to help me on my farm. Okay, if that's the case, do I tell them, no, we don't want your kids helping you. They need to be in school. Well, I got to feed my kids, and I can't run it all myself, right? So in that, am I flexible enough? I think with technology now, and with phones and other forms, maybe there's a half step, right? Like maybe they'll eventually get to a classroom, but there's still education that can be delivered. So I feel like there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I would agree with Professor Chris on that we need to have in mind. There's also a different way of teaching. For instance, as I'm working with the school in Uganda, right, they are interested in having a farm to provide food for the students. And from my perspective, it's like, okay, so let's combine that with what we're teaching. So if we're learning biology, then we go and work with the plants. So I'm studying biology for 45 minutes, and now I'm working in a high tunnel or a greenhouse or an open field with plants. And then I'm studying maybe some more biology, and then another hour with goats or sheep or cattle, right? So I'm learning the biology of the animals that I'm working with. I'm learning the biology of the plants that I'm working with. I'm learning food science and therefore chemistry, right? In other words, I can start to combine, even if I'm way down on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and I'm at the basic level, I can start developing curriculum that connects even the very basic things with some of the more academic topics. And even in agriculture, okay, well, that connects with computer science because I can have a web service that collects agricultural data. And therefore, as a student, it's going to be important for me, even in an agricultural economy, to learn coding and different types of web services and other types of computer technology. So I see the curriculum, not only the method that we're training, but even the topics and how we integrate it with where people are. And then some of the other things I mentioned before is also needed, right? Because especially children, you need a good nutrition for your brain and body to develop properly. So there's back to that hierarchy of needs. And then, you know, if there's a lot of crime or violence or instability or a lot of moving around, it's hard for young people to concentrate if there's all these things moving and changing around them. And they're like very anxious or fearful or so forth. So getting the whole community involved for diet, for nutrition, for keeping a peaceful, as best we can, community to foster a culture of education and honoring and having the time for a quality education.
Thank you, Brian, for kind of launching us into some innovative ways of delivering education. You know, a former speaker mentioned about, you know, training and equipping teachers and ongoing support for teachers and giving them all the resources. That is fascinating. I've only got like a minute on this, but I'm really keen to hear on Professor Jared on this point. In the past, Professor Jared, I've heard you trying to address a similar question when you're trying to balance between need and delivery of education. You're talking about, you know, a part of the world young people are learning in open classes, and you know, how do they concentrate? Does that impact on the quality of delivery? Do you think that sees some of the inequalities that these gentlemen are talking about, Professor Jared?
Thank you, Dr. Ronnie, and I want to associate myself with the sentiment which have been given by my fellow panelists. And if we have to talk about quality, having identified the word quality, surely there was inequality. Sure there was, and that's why they want to keyword through this. And you're saying, of course, let us look at the equality of distribution of academic resources. What are some of the budgets? We have talked about 10%. How many governments in the world have given a commitment through their national budgets towards education? And if you have to talk about the needs of these young people, if you don't give enough resources, how are you going to attain this quality education? So there is limitation of funding. Whether it is either by omission or commission is a subject for discussion on another time. Do these young people have enough books, both writing materials and the textbook to study? Chris has talked about that we are talking about technology. I can assure you there are some places, even in my country and some parts of the world, where students have not seen a computer. And then you come forward and you tell us, surely we want to talk about quality education. Are we really serious? Let me just give you a very serious scenario which happened in my country, and let me use it as a case study. In the northern parts of Kenya, eastern parts of Kenya, bordering Somalia, there is issue of terrorism from Al-Shabaab. And that region is predominantly occupied by the locals who are Somalis. So the rest of the Kenyans who don't come from that community and who do not profess the Islamic faith, you are identified from class and you are killed. And then some students, teachers felt that they needed to be secure. And they asked for protection and security. They went on strike. Do you know what the government did? The Teacher Service Commission, it sacked these teachers. how are you now addressing? If the teacher is not secure, and that's what Brian was talking about, the security of teachers, surely, how we want to meet the needs of these people so that they can be able to compete with students in Europe, students in America, students in parts of the world. What has been the attention? Have we given attention to the teachers? Because no education can take place if we don't apply the formula of a triangle. One side is teachers, the other side are parents, and the other side are students or pupils, with the government giving conducive environment to meet the needs of these people. Yes, we are committed talking about, yes, the needs of these people, giving them quality education. When we, in early childhood, preschool, pupils have to pay school fees. They have to pay the fee. And remember, these are the people who are living in less than $1 a day. And that's why they talked about master hierarchy of needs. They have to deal with the stomach. They have to deal with food. The rest of the things comes later. So what we need to do here is that we need to have a honest conversation. That's what I say. And some cultures in my country and elsewhere in Africa, they have not given these young people equal opportunities. Like the girl child is neglected, is not being taken to school. There are some communities which say that once the girl child has reached the age of adulthood, 16, 14, they got married off. So for us to achieve this, we have to work in a way so that we move those areas, those communities which have been marginalized and have been discriminated. And I want to see, in terms of quality education, what are the respective government, the work done to address marginalization and discrimination of people who are left behind.
Right.
So on this, as we talk about inequality levels, we need to have a candid conversation and slay the relevant in the room.
Wow. That's excellent, Professor Jared. You've really hammered in on the funding, on the budget, on the resources, on addressing the need, everyday need, the hierarchy, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how the two tally with education, how they impact on everyday function of a human being, and therefore the ability to retain information. Never mind the environment where education is delivered, but, can you process it when you're under pressure? Brian talks about, when they are hungry, when the need is to feed the family, can I actually send my child to school? Now, that is very, very impactful. Now, that takes us nicely into my last question. I know I've eaten up a lot of your time. My last question seeks for some ideas on how the society can respond to what you guys have been talking about when we're talking about quality education. How can the society respond to this? Professor, you've already started talking about, Professor Jared, that we need to have honest and candid conversations. Let us not shy away from the need that is being identified here. And let's address these things. Does it make sense to just digitalize everything, including education, when an average child in Africa doesn't have access to a mobile phone? When countries do not have access to the internet? I'm talking about national governments struggling accessing internet, and then we digitalize everything. How can society respond to the notion of quality education? Brian, would you like to start us off on that, please? Thank you.
Sure. These are just a couple of thoughts, right? Because it's a huge topic. But how do we engage? I believe, right, that a lot of these discussions should be sort of general community, like village, city, open meetings where, like, we could talk about all these topics at an open meeting that would include all the different members of the community, right? The teaching community, the governance, like political community, but the average citizen, to really be honest and forthcoming about the challenges, about the importance of quality education and the challenges of it. because I think for this to change, it's going to require a cultural change, not just education policy, but the thinking in the country has to change. The thinking in the community needs to change. And to include all different parties, in, like, for instance, wouldn't it be important to have policemen show up and say, you know, we really do need to spend the money on this education, because if we don't, we're arresting kids in the street or whatever. We're finding crime and other things going on because we don't have a good education system. People need to hear that. They need to hear from the policemen or from the teachers. It's like, yeah, this is good, but we're having problems with attention because kids have these phones on all the time, and you, the parents, are insisting that they have phones with them all the time, and instead of paying attention in class, they're texting their buddies, you know, and they're not learning, right? Like, so these are, I think, kind of like Dr. Jared had talked about, these are the kind of candid and honest conversations we could have with community members as well as the government officials. We need the funding, we need the access to food, we need the security and lack of violence and more stability so students can pay attention and come to class consistently. So we need a transportation system, right? Like, just to kind of come open. And a lot of times that might be crowdsourcing the ideas to solve those problems, because they might not be all solved by a federal government budget or even a province or a state budget, right? It might be a local solution in one place that's different than another to deal with these challenges and really accentuate the quality of education. So that's just kind of kicking it off, right? I know everybody here on this call has thoughts on that, but I'd like to engage and include the community and all these different members and these different issues and see what each member is being willing to contribute, right? To really create a learning environment for everyone. That would mean even the politicians and the teachers and the police force and whomever it is, and the farmers. We all need to be continuously educated. But there's a unique time in personal history when you as a pupil, call it age 5 to 16 or 18, a unique time in your personal development where you can really learn character, spiritual values, technical vocational skills, and educational academic skills. And once that time goes, age 5 to 15 or 18, you're going to struggle because that's a unique time that you have to really pursue those things. And so we as a community want to make sure that you get the maximum opportunity in that age range.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I like that whole notion of engaging, you know, those key stakeholders that you identified, community leaders, politicians, having discussions like these, open discussions, and also including the young people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Young people have to have a voice on these things. You know, remember the key goal, our key goal in this team for this year is to create a collection of articles, global, meaningful discussion about quality education, encourage creativity, and provide equitable and a healthy environment to learn. So I believe this is a starting point. Talking about it, provoking people to think beyond what is the norm, you know, kind of challenging the cultural norms that the Brian you're bringing up. And also maybe encourage decision makers to resource education a bit more, like Professor Jared says. Professor Chris, what's your take on this?
So as he gets ready to answer, I just want to say we need to do our closing comments and wrap up as soon as possible. So go ahead, Professor Chris, and whatever else you have, Dr. Ronnie, and then we'll wrap up.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so I will be very quick with this because Brian has actually mentioned most of the key things that needs to be done. But quickly, you know, in where I'm from, I always talk about where I'm from. People want to be educated because they believe once you're educated, you have a future security. Your future, you you live a better life. And looking at the rate of unemployment in this region, that by itself has discouraged a lot of persons who want to spend so much in having quality education. Because at the end of the day, when you spend millions of going to school, you don't get a job. And you look at those who did not get the degrees, the masters, and they might be doing far well. So in this part of the world, it's a growing concern. So that boils down to governance. It boils down to politicians. It boils down to legal framework. It boils down to government ensuring that the economy is viable in a way that it creates opportunity and a reward for those that truly have gone through the system of having to educate themselves. It's very important because the end justifies the means. So when you are sure that no matter how much I'm going to invest my time, I'm sure that at the end of the day, I'll be rewarded by the system. So we have an informal economy where you'll be so surprised that those who are not even educated might even do far well than those who have gone through the walls of schools. So I think there's a need for a deliberate effort to adjust those abnormalities so that the system we have can truly reward those who have gone through schools, and they should be at the ends of controlling what is happening in the economy. It's very important. Dealing with unemployment, leadership approach, regulation of licenses. You see, we must also begin to. That's why we talk about governance. Governance must also be able to make sure that those who are educated, who have the license, are actually those that do the job. You know, when you work or you live in an informal sector where a civil engineer is not needed to build a house, where a mechanical engineering would not fix a car. Anybody can fix a car because there is no proper regulation of licensing. So you don't need to. So that also do not encourage people to actually want to get to that point of having those form of education that will make them valuable. So proper regulation of licensing and ensuring that there is proper enforcement of professionalism in the economic context, so that professionals are actually the ones that do the job. It will help to also help people to have confidence in the educational system. You know, the social media has also caused a lot of shift in the kind of education we have today. So educational curriculum must be one that is also tilted to helping every country meet up with the global need. You know, from where I'm from, we don't have a university in my country, for example, that runs a degree in artificial intelligence, in space engineering. These are where the world is going. This is what the world is going. So we need to begin to, as investors and stakeholders in the educational sector, begin to look at having programs that will build the people to be relevant in meeting the immediate need of not just the local society, even the global society. We talk about student loan system. Government must also begin to look at student loan system to help students achieve quality education, because quality education can be expensive. If you want to, there's education, we have schools everywhere, but if you want to access quality education with good laboratory, good practical equipment, it can be expensive. So government must begin to have this value to help. And Professor Jao talked about teachers' job security, retraining of teachers, and a whole lot. I think we might not be able to mention all of them, but right. I want to leave it at that. So thank you.
No, we really appreciate. Just as I relinquish the microphone to Crystal, I just wanted to just round up by saying that what we are discussing here moves me. It kind of touches me. Just in the last 12 months, as I relinquish the microphone, Crystal, Dr. Crystal, in the last 12 months, I've been to a school, okay, where in order for me to address the school, the assembly, they had to go out in the dust. It was their winter. It was windy and dusty. By the time that I finished talking to the kids, my eyes were full of sand. But these kids are bright, and the education system is putting all its effort, but it's just not fully funded. There's no money. Also, in the last 12 months, I've been to a country where I went to this school that I worked with, nice boarding school, kids live there. It is a boarding school, they've got nothing to eat. Okay? But parents continue to send their children because they want the children educated. And then finally, just in the last few months, I was in an Asian country that I won't mention by name here, 250 kids that I'm addressing, full conference. I asked for a date of birth. None of them knew the date of birth. None of them knew the date of birth. Now, when you talk about inequalities, this subject is close to my heart. It's real. I've seen a lot as I go around the world. Dr. Crystal, I hand over to you. These gentlemen and everyone here, people are saying we need more time, even with people that are influential, and most importantly, the young people that are on the receiving end of this education we're talking about. Thank you.
Yes. It definitely has been a very quick time. I think we could be on here for a couple another 2, 3, 4 hours and going into the various points. And so I really want to thank everyone. And gentlemen, I know you are men of many, many words, but I want to try to do something right here. Everybody hold up one finger. Hold up one finger on the screen for me. Okay, so this is your promise to me. If you just had to surmise you can put your finger down. If you were to surmise all of what you just went over for the importance of quality education into one word, not the explanation of it, but just one word, because we obviously are going to have another forum. What would that one word be to what is important for quality education? So Brian, I'm putting my trust in you to lead the way with just this one word. What would your one word be?
There'd be lots of words I'd like to use, but now being constrained to just one, I would say community.
Community. Very good. Community. Everybody say
community.
community.
The members of the community.
Everybody say community. Community. Awesome.
I do community, but I'd say communication as well.
Communication. Dr. Ronnie said communication. So, okay, we have community and then we have communication. Professor Jared.
Involve.
Okay. Community, communication, and involve. Very good. And Professor Chris.
Okay, I would say value.
Value.
Because please just give me, because whatsoever you have value for would not be too expensive to invest. Value. Yeah.
Value. Yeah. Okay. I know it's hard, guys. I know it's hard. I don't want Dr. Sonia to be mad at us for going too far over. So thank you all so much. This has been a very, very interesting time. I do want to personally be in touch with each one of you related to what I do in communication. I've been in over 40 some countries doing genetic research, biotech, ministry, education, public speaking, ministry, medical missions, all different kind of things in schools. And Dr. Jared knows he was one of my hosts the last time I was in Kenya. And so I just thank you all for being here and for sharing related to the Congress for Global Communication, as this was definitely a part of the mission. Part of the mission I stated when we started was empowerment dialogue. And so I truly believe that has happened on today. So thank you all. And I want to go back over here to the commercial we'll play on our way out. And Ronnie, you did a really, really great job, Dr. Ronnie, on facilitating the questions. So thank you, sir, for that.
You're welcome.
And until next time, we thank you all for being on the Congress for Global Communication. Thank you.